guys, Adam here again. So thought I'd do a quick demonstration on the Stihl Easy Sharpener. So not sure exactly what the name of this is called. I'll find it out and I'll put it in the, I guess in the links below. That might work well. Bought this when I bought our little MS-180, which I'll do a review on another day. Good little machine, out of action at the moment because I lost a little circlip, but not the point. So, wanted to do a little bit of a review on how easy it is to sharpen a chainsaw blade. Now, I'll do something in the future on, I guess, just general maintenance of your chainsaw, but this is specifically on this. Now, the reason I wanted to do this is that being brand new to using a chainsaw, or haven't used one for about 15 years, probably the scariest part was how do you actually look after your chain to make sure it cuts well? Because if you don't look after it, blunt chain is a dangerous chain because you're putting a lot more pressure on, you're putting a lot more downward force into the bit of timber that you're trying to cut through, and then that can cause other issues. It can make the chain pop off, spin around, flick up and get you. Could mean that you actually break your bar when it's inside because you're putting that much force into it. A chainsaw should really be able to do its own job. So you just guide it and it'll push its way through. And that all comes down to making sure that you have sharpened it correctly. Now, the beauty of this is that it doesn't just sharpen the bits that, I guess, the blade bits, the little teeth on it. It actually sharpens what's called the rakers, which helps guide how deep your chain digs into the timber with every cut. So every time it cuts around, you have to think of it as how deep is it going in. So how deep is every cut going through your timber, through your piece of wood, whatever it is. You're cutting a tree down, you're cutting firewood up, whatever it might be. So your rakers are just as important as your teeth, because that is either they're too low and then it cuts too big of a chunks off, and then that's how it can put pressure on your chain, or they're too high and your actual teeth, your bits that are cutting the timber, don't actually get into the timber because they're covering it. They're like blocking because they're higher. So that's why this is really great, because it does both at the same time. Now, I'm going to go through exactly how it works, but really all you need to know is that it's got a couple of directions. So I'll get in nice and close. It's got a couple of arrows, and you'll notice it's got a slant there. So that's 30 degrees. Now, if you spin it around the other way, you'll see no arrows, but it's still got the slant. So why that's important is that when you're pushing through, if you keep the angle, which is how this is, on your teeth, you're going to get a perfect cut. Now, it's not going to be, some people talk about, oh, they want to go to 35 mil or they want to go to 20 mil or whatever it might be because they're doing certain jobs. If you're watching this video, then you're probably like me and that doesn't really make a huge amount of difference to you. All you want to do is make sure that it's sharp, and this does that. So how it works is you go with the arrow, you push with the blade away from you, and it does two cuts at the same time, or two sharpens at the same time, I guess we would say. So your round file here sits within your teeth and sharpens the tooth, which is how sharp you're cutting into the timber. So that's the important bit, to get a sharp tooth using that round file. Now you'll also notice that there's a square or a rectangle file through the center here. Now what that does the raker. So that gets a perfect height using these guide bars. So it's mirrored on each side. So when you're cutting or when you're filing, it's only using one lot, which is two guide bars, the circle file, and then your square file. And then when you're going using the other side of it, two guide bars, your circle file, and your square file. So that's all you need to know. Now I'll show you exactly how it works. What's important though is that you don't just use one of these for different types of chains. Now this fits a certain chain, and that's because of that round file through the center there, that it does a certain depth, it's a certain thickness. So this one here, it's got it labeled on the side here, you need to match up to your blade, to your chain. So this here, you can see 3/8 and 4 mil. So that's how big your chain is. So 4 mil is the thickness of your file, your round file, and 3/8 is the gauge of it. So this fits my MS-180. I've also got a MS251. I have to get a different one of these, and you do that anyway. When you're doing it for different chainsaws, if you've got different chainsaws with different chain on it, you're gonna have to buy a different file anyway. So it's not any more expensive, or I guess it is because these are more expensive, but you're buying a file anyway. So it's not like you're having to buy 3 of these and only one of the other old style file. You'd still have to buy 3 of them as well. So I'll show you exactly how it works. Nice and easy. So when you are going to sharpen your chainsaw, there's a few things to remember. You got to remember how the locking mechanism works. So this is unlocked, and before I go touching the chain, I'm going to put a glove on because I don't want to cut my hand. So this is unlocked. It can spin. You push it down and it's now locked in place. So when you are sharpening, I always find it easier to lock it in place. Some people can do it while it's spinning. You just got to get the right angle and the right pressure. If you put too much pressure on, I'll give you an example here. If you put too much pressure on it when you're going like this, it actually moves, which you don't want. Where if you lock it in, it stays nice and steady for you as you're doing it. So I'll show you that again. Nice and steady as you're pushing through. So you notice, so when you put your first bit in, it's perpendicular to the chain, to the blade. And I'll bring this up here so we can see. And then you can see we go and we finish the same. So that plastic, that 30 degrees that we were talking about before, starts hard up against your blade and finishes hard up against your blade. So you see here, I've got it in a vise to keep it nice and steady. I use a toolbox which fits perfectly under here for when I do it, just to keep the pressure off the end of the chainsaw. I've got it locked, and then I go through. The other thing is, and I'm gonna have to find where I've put it, when you're sharpening your blades, you've got to make sure that you're always sharpening it to the same depth. So the teeth that are on it, they go both ways. They go one on the right and one on the left. And it goes alternating around your whole chain. So when you're cutting, you've got to make sure that you put even pressure and the even amount of push-throughs every time you do it. Because if you do them out of sync, you'll find that when you're cutting through, you'll cut through on an angle rather than cutting straight down. Now, how to know where you've started, to know where to finish, so you're not going over the same amount of teeth time and time again. The best way I've found, and it'd be good if anyone knows of any way different, is using a little bit of plumber's tape. Now, I'll go and get it, and I'll show you how I use it. Okay, a little bit of plumber's tape. Now, when you do it, you do your first cut. So, you just got to make sure you get it the right way around. You go through and you do your first go of it. And when you've cut through, you get your tape. And you wrap it around like that. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but I've wrapped it around that tooth that I just sharpened. Now, why that's important is that as we're going around, we'll take that off, put our glove on. As we're going around, we're sharpening, sharpening, still going, still going, and now we've come back to our bit that we've just started on. So we know that when we get to this one here, which is the same, it's on the left hand side, so this is the left hand side tooth. When I finish on this left hand side tooth, I know I don't need to go any further. And then all I do is I reuse that piece and I put it on the other side. So I'll sharpen the other side when I spin the chainsaw around, and I'll do the same thing. And then I'll work my way through, sharpen, 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 until I get to there. And that's the best way. They don't get stuck. It's nice and cheap. I think a roll of this is about $3, and I've used probably about a quarter of a cent to use that. So I just have a little piece on handy, always know where to go. So that's it. That's the beauty of using one of these. Now I'll show you how they actually work. So when you do it, again, as I said, you get there and you push through. 1, 2. So you'll see there's little filings that have come off that, and it's a nice and sharp edge. And it's also cut my raker too. So I've got my raker at the perfect height. As long as you're doing this flat and square, you're getting the right angle, it'll cut your raker at a perfect height, and then it'll cut that at a perfect height too. When I do it, I do 2 firm pushes through, not rough, not hard. You've got to make sure it's a nice consistent push through, nice and smooth. I do 2 and then I move on to the next one. 1, 2, move on to the next one. And then when you do the other side, you can either flip the chainsaw around the other side to make sure you're pushing with, if you're more comfortable pushing away from it, or you just spin this around the other way. And now I'm doing the right hand side. You see I start on this side here and I pull towards me. 1, 2. So I'll show you that again. 1, 2. And that's it. That's how you use one of these. Fantastic bit of equipment, nice and easy for noobs that don't know what they're doing like me. I don't have to worry about the manual way of having your file on its own, the raker on its own. Don't have to get the right heights, because this just does it all for me. Now the alternative to one of these is using an electric grinder or something like that that cuts these for you. But honestly, don't need it. This works so easy and does it so quickly that anything else is overkill in my mind. And that's how it works. Hope you guys have enjoyed that. Bye all.